Humans were genetically impossible, and Ralph Williams's groundbreaking research proved it beyond doubt. Ralph stared at the data scrolling across his holoscreen, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and disbelief. He had spent months aboard the research station Andromeda 7, analyzing the genetic code of every alien species humanity had encountered since spreading across the stars. But what he found in the human genome defied explanation. It was common knowledge that the rigors of space travel and colonizing alien worlds had changed humanity over the centuries. But Ralph's research revealed those changes went far deeper than anyone imagined. He discovered genes that granted immunity to the deadliest alien diseases, allowed survival in the most hostile environments, and even unlocked latent telekinetic potential. These adaptations weren't just unlikely. According to everything Ralph knew about genetics and evolutionary biology, they should have been impossible. The implications were staggering and terrifying. If some external force or intelligence was guiding human evolution, unlocking abilities beyond the limits of natural selection, then Ralph had just stumbled onto the biggest scientific discovery in history. But he had no time to process the enormity of his findings before disaster struck. Without warning, the Vorkarian Empire launched a surprise attack on human space. The ruthless Emperor Umbra, seeing Ralph's research as a threat to Vorkarian supremacy, declared humanity an enemy and began slaughtering millions in a brutal blitzkrieg. The Andromeda 7 station was one of the first targets hit. Ralph barely escaped with his life and his research as the station exploded around him, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Vorkarians would not rest until humanity was either conquered or exterminated, and with the fate of his entire species hanging in the balance, Ralph realized he might be holding the key to humanity's salvation in his hands. He had to keep his research out of Vorkarian hands at all costs. He needed to unlock the full secrets of humanity's impossible genetics, and use that knowledge to rally humans and aliens alike in a desperate war of survival against Umbra's empire. Ralph didn't know if he could do it, but he knew he had to try, because if he failed, the Vorkarians would make sure humanity had no future at all. His palms sweating from the devastating Vorkarian assault on Andromeda 7 and the staggering implications of his research, Ralph Williams knew he needed help to unravel the mystery of humanity's impossible genetics. There was only one person he could turn to, his old friend and colleague, Dr. Evan Nakamura, a brilliant scientist renowned for his expertise in advanced alien technologies. Ralph arranged a secret meeting with Evan on the remote, desolate world of Zephyrus 3, where Evan had been conducting cutting-edge research on exotic propulsion systems salvaged from ancient alien ruins. As Ralph stepped into Evan's makeshift lab, a converted cargo container nestled among the planet's rocky outcroppings, he was greeted by the familiar sight of his friend hunched over a workbench, tinkering with a glowing, pulsating device. "Ralph, it's good to see you," Evan said, looking up from his work with a smile that quickly faded as he noticed the haunted look in Ralph's eyes. "What's wrong? What's happened?" Ralph took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the past few days, the groundbreaking discoveries about human genetics, the devastating Vorkarian attack, and his narrow escape from Andromeda 7. As he spoke, he could see the shock and disbelief written across Evan's face, mirroring his own initial reaction to the incredible revelations. This changes everything," Evan whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. "If what you're saying is true, if some external force has been guiding human evolution, unlocking abilities beyond the limits of natural selection, the implications are staggering." As the two scientists pored over Ralph's data, a wild theory began to take shape in their minds. What if the mysterious external force responsible for humanity's accelerated evolution was not some unknown cosmic phenomenon, but the work of an ancient, hyper-advanced alien race, a species so technologically superior that they could manipulate the very building blocks of life itself? "The progenitors," Evan breathed, his eyes widening with realization. "It has to be them. The legends speak of a civilization that existed eons ago, a race that seeded the galaxy with life and vanished without a trace. What if they didn't just create life, but guided its evolution? What if they engineered humanity for some greater purpose? Ralph felt a shiver run down his spine at the thought. If the progenitors had indeed manipulated human genetics, then uncovering the truth behind their motives could be the key to humanity's survival in the face of the Vorkarian onslaught. But to do that, they would need more than just theories and conjecture. They would need hard evidence of the progenitors' involvement. "We have to find proof," Ralph said, his voice filled with persistence. "And I think I know where we can start looking. There are rumors of a heavily guarded Vorkarian archive on the planet Nexus Prime, said to contain ancient alien artifacts and knowledge dating back millions of years. If the progenitors left any clues behind, that's where we'll find them." Evan nodded slowly, the gears turning in his head. "It won't be easy. Nexus Prime is deep in Vorkarian-controlled space, and the archive is sure to be heavily defended. We'll need a team of the best and brightest if we're going to pull this off." Over the next few hours, Ralph and Evan worked frantically to assemble a crack team of trusted allies for their covert mission. There was Captain Marcus Reeves, a grizzled human soldier with a chip on his shoulder and a burning hatred for the Vorkarians who had slaughtered his family. Zaxxon Trell, a roguish alien smuggler, with an uncanny knack for slicing through even the toughest security systems. And Dr. Leela Sorensen, a brilliant xenobiologist who had devoted her life to studying the progenitors' influence on the evolution of species across the galaxy. With their team assembled, Ralph and Evan set about procuring a ship for their daring infiltration of Nexus Prime. Through Zaxxon's underworld contacts, they managed to secure a Vorkarian stealth ship, a sleek, dart-like vessel dripping with advanced cloaking technology and powerful sensor arrays. It was a dangerous gambit. If they were caught in possession of stolen Vorkarian technology, the consequences would be unthinkable. But with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, they knew they had no choice. As the stealth ship streaked through the star-strewn void of Vorkarian-controlled space, Ralph felt a sense of unwavering perseverance settle over him. He knew the odds were stacked against them, that they were embarking on a mission that could very well be their last. But he also knew that they could not afford to fail. The secrets of humanity's impossible genetics, and perhaps the key to their very survival, lay waiting to be uncovered on Nexus Prime. Suddenly the ship's sensors pinged an alert, jolting Ralph from his thoughts. Zaxxon frowned at the readout, his brow furrowing in concern. "We've got an unidentified object on scanners, boss. Looks like some kind of escape pod, and it's seen better days." Ralph and Evan exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. They both knew the risks of investigating an unknown vessel in hostile territory, but they also knew they couldn't afford to leave any stone unturned. With a nod, Ralph gave the order to bring the pod aboard. As the battered, scorched husk of the escape pod was hauled into the stealth ship's cramped cargo bay, Ralph and the others gathered around it warily. Zaxxon worked the controls to the pod's hatch, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar alien interface. With a hiss of hydraulics, the hatch slid open, revealing the broken, bleeding form of an alien slumped over the pod's control console. "Help me," the alien gasped, his voice thin and reedy with pain. "I am Crux, fled Vorkarian research station. Must warn you." Ralph and Evan rushed forward, gently easing the wounded alien out of the pod and onto the deck of the cargo bay. Dr. Sorensen knelt beside him, her medical scanner already whirring as she assessed the extent of his injuries. But even Ralph could see that Crux was in bad shape, his lifeblood pooling on the deck beneath him. "What happened?" Ralph asked urgently, kneeling down to meet Crux's fading gaze. What were the Vorkarians doing at that research station? Crux coughed, a trickle of dark blood oozing from the corner of his mouth. "Genesis! Codex!" he wheezed, his voice little more than a whisper now. "Progenitor artifact. Vorkarians found it. Contains secrets of genetic manipulation. Emperor Umbra. Will use it. Create unstoppable army." Ralph felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his gut as the implications of Crux's words sank in. If the Vorkarians had discovered an ancient progenitor artifact capable of unlocking the secrets of genetic engineering, They could create an army of super soldiers, warriors with abilities beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. And with that army at his command, Emperor Umbra would be unstoppable in his bid for total domination. "Where is this Genesis Codex now?" Evan asked, his voice tight with urgency. "Do the Vorkarians have it?" With a final shuddering breath, Crux slumped back against the deck, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling of the cargo bay. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft, steady hum of the ship's engines. Ralph clenched his fists, a flame of commitment burning in his chest. The stakes had just been raised to a terrifying new level. It was no longer just about uncovering the truth behind humanity's impossible genetics. Now they were in a desperate race against time to stop the Vorkarians from unleashing an engineered army of conquest upon the galaxy. Failure was not an option. As the stealth ship hurtled through the starry void towards the looming bulk of Nexus Prime, Ralph and his team began their final preparations for the daring infiltration of the Vorkarian archive. They checked and double-checked their weapons and equipment, reviewed the schematics and security protocols Zaxxon had managed to slice from the Vorkarian databanks, and went over their plan of attack again and again until they could recite it in their sleep. But even as they readied themselves for the most important mission of their lives, Ralph could feel the weight of the humanity's fate pressing down upon his shoulders. He knew that what they were about to attempt was nothing short of suicide. A handful of humans and aliens, pitted against the might of the entire Vorkarian Empire. But he also knew that they had no choice. The future of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As the stealth ship slipped into orbit around Nexus Prime, its cloaking field shimmering against the starry backdrop of space, Ralph took a deep breath and steeled himself for what was to come. There could be no turning back now. The die was cast, and the fate of everything he held dear rested in their hands. With a final nod to his team, Ralph felt the fire of perseverance burn even brighter. This was it. This was where they would make their stand, against the Vorkarians, against Emperor Umbra, against the very forces of darkness that threatened to consume the galaxy. And as he felt the ship shudder with the telltale vibration of the docking clamps engaging, he knew that there was only one thing left to do, to step out into the unknown, into the heart of the enemy's stronghold, to face their destiny head-on, and to fight like hell for the future of all humanity. The team moved swiftly through the shadowy corridors of the Vorkarian archive, their footsteps echoing softly against the metal floors. Zaxxon's fingers flew across a datapad, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. "Almost there," he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Marcus hefted his pulse rifle, scanning for threats. "Just get us in, Tech Boy. I'll handle any unfriendly welcoming parties." They reached a massive vault door. Zaxxon grinned triumphantly as it slid open with a soft hiss. Inside lay a treasure trove of alien artifacts and glowing data crystals. Ralph's eyes widened. Incredible, the progenitor chamber. As they began downloading data, alarms blared. Zaxxon cursed. "They've detected us!" The door exploded inward. Vorkarian soldiers poured through, led by a hulking figure in black armor. The firefight was chaos. Marcus and Zaxxon held the line as Ralph, Evan, and Lila worked frantically to decrypt the progenitor data. "I've got something," Ralph shouted over the din. "Coordinates for a planet called Erebus. The Genesis Codex is there." A stray shot grazed Zaxxon's arm. He stumbled, crying out in pain. "We're out of time," Evan yelled. Ralph's eyes darted around desperately. He noticed a faint seam in the wall. "Here, a hidden passage." They retreated down the tunnel as Vorkarian reinforcements swarmed in. Zoltar's furious roar echoed behind them. They sprinted for their ship, Marcus half-carrying a limping Zaxxon. As they prepared for launch, a searing bolt of energy struck Zaxxon in the back. He collapsed with an agonized scream. "Go, go, go," Ralph shouted. The ship rocketed away from Nexus Prime, alarms blaring as Vorkarian fighters gave chase. Ralph gripped the controls, executing a series of wild, evasive maneuvers. "Did we lose them?" Lila asked, tending to Zaxxon's wound. Evan checked the sensors and paled. No, they're still on our tail, and that's not all. Ralph, look at this data. Ralph scanned the partially decrypted files and felt his blood run cold. A genetic plague? If the Vorkarians get their hands on this... We have to get to Erebus, Marcus said firmly. Before they do. A groan from Zaxxon drew their attention. He needs real medical care, Lila said. This is beyond my abilities. Ralph nodded grimly. Shadowport, it's our only option. The notorious smuggler's haven loomed before them, a patchwork space station cobbled together from derelict ships and debris. They docked in a grimy hangar, drawing curious stares from the station's motley inhabitants. Lila, you're with me, Ralph said. We'll find a surgeon. Marcus, Evan, see what you can learn about Erebus and the Phantom Nebula. As Ralph and Lila ventured into Shadowport's dingy corridors, Marcus and Evan made their way to a seedy cantina. Alien patrons eyed them suspiciously. Buy you a drink? A raspy voice asked. They turned to see a cloaked figure in the shadows. Who's asking? Marcus growled. Call me the Whisper, the alien replied, and I believe I have some information you'd find valuable. Meanwhile, Ralph haggled with an Arcturian surgeon. A commotion outside drew his attention. Vorkarian soldiers were flooding into the station. Zoltar, he breathed, we're out of time. Ralph's communicator crackled. Boss, Evan's voice came through, we've got a potential guide to Erebus, but can we trust them? Ralph hesitated, weighing their options as chaos erupted around them. With a deep breath, he made his choice. Bring them, we're leaving now. The Whisper's ship lurched as it broke Shadowport's gravity well, alarms blaring. Ralph gripped his seat, fingers tightening. Vorkarian fighters screamed past, energy bolts sizzling through space. The Whisper's gloved hands danced across the controls. Their ship rolled and dove, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. Through the viewport, Ralph glimpsed Marcus and Zaxxon's ship peeling away, drawing half the Vorkarian fleet with them, his gut clenched. Were they sacrificing themselves? A thunderous explosion rocked their ship. Sparks showered from a damaged console. Shields at 60%, Evan reported grimly. Ralph shook his head in awe. Our genetic enhancements, I've never seen anything like it. As Shadowport receded behind them, Ralph felt a mix of relief and dread. They'd escaped, but at what cost? And what fresh dangers awaited in the void rifts? The Whisper's ship dropped out of FTL, revealing the swirling purple-black expanse of the Phantom Nebula. Crackling energy discharges and gravitational eddies twisted the very fabric of space before them. The Whisper nodded. Indeed, and without the Starpath compass, it's a death trap. Ralph studied the navigational readouts, his brow furrowed. You're sure this compass is on Hadrian's Fall? As sure as one can be of anything in this galaxy, the Whisper replied cryptically. The cult that possesses it is unstable, but they guard their secrets well. As they neared Hadrian's Fall, the ship's comms crackled to life. A familiar voice, strained but alive, filled the bridge. Boss, you read me? Ralph's heart leapt. Marcus, you made it! Barely, Marcus grunted. Zaxxon's stable, but we've got company. That Vorkarian commander, Zoltar. He's called in some heavy hitter, a merc named Krax. Ralph exchanged worried glances with his team. Stay low, he ordered. We'll rendezvous on Hadrian's Fall. The planet loomed before them, a desolate orb of rust-red canyons and decaying ruins. As they descended through the atmosphere, Ralph spotted the cult's compound, a sprawling complex of twisted metal and stone. They hadn't even touched down when the first shots rang out. Crazed cultists in tattered robes swarmed from the ruins, firing wildly with cobbled-together energy weapons. They fought their way through the compound, the Whisper leading them deeper into its labyrinthine corridors. The walls were covered in frenzied scrawlings, equations, genetic sequences, and grotesque anatomical diagrams. These markings, Lila gasped, studying them, they're fragments of the Genesis Codex. A bone-chilling howl echoed through the halls. Ralph spun, weapon raised, as a lumbering monstrosity rounded the corner. Its flesh was warped and twisted, limbs fused at unnatural angles. "What the hell is that?" Evan shouted, opening fire. The creature shrugged off their shots, charging forward with inhuman speed. Ralph dove aside, feeling the rush of air as massive claws swept past his face. "The cult's been experimenting," the Whisper called out, tossing Ralph a strange device. "Use this!" Ralph activated the progenitor tech without hesitation. A pulse of energy erupted from the device, and the creature collapsed, its mutated flesh rapidly decaying. They pressed on, fighting through waves of cultists and abominations. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum. The cult's leader, a spindly alien with too many eyes, clutched the star path compass to its chest. "You cannot have it," the leader shrieked. "The Codex will remake us all." Ralph leveled his weapon. "The Codex is too dangerous. Hand over the compass." A tense standoff ensued, broken by the sound of an explosion from above. Krax the Blood Hunter had arrived. In the ensuing chaos, Ralph lunged for the compass. His fingers closed around the ancient artifact just as Krax burst into the chamber, cybernetic implants whirring. "Time to go!" Ralph shouted. They fled through the compound's collapsing tunnels, Krax in hot pursuit. The Whisper's ship came into view, engines already spooling up. Ralph's team piled aboard, narrowly escaping Krax's deadly cybernetic weaponry. As they rocketed away from Hadrian's Fall, Ralph clutched the starpath compass, his mind racing. They had the means to navigate the void rifts now, but at what cost? And with Krax on their tail, how long before Zoltar himself caught up to them? The Phantom Nebula loomed ahead, its swirling depths promising both salvation and peril. Ralph took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges to come. The race for Erebus, and the truth behind humanity's impossible genetics, had only just begun. Ralph's hands flew across the control panel as the Whisper's ship plunged into the swirling chaos of the void rifts. The starpath compass pulsed with an otherworldly light, its alien technology guiding them through the treacherous expanse. "Hold on!" Ralph shouted as the ship lurched violently. A massive gravitational eddy threatened to tear the vessel apart, metal groaning under the strain. Lila gripped her seat, nucleus tightening. "We can't take much more of this." Evan's eyes darted between readouts. "Shields at 30%. We've got to find a way out of here." The Whisper's raspy voice cut through the din. "There, a gap in the anomalies. If we time it right—" Ralph didn't hesitate. He pushed the engines to their limit, threading the needle between two colliding spatial distortions. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they wouldn't make it. Then they burst through, the ship shuddering as it escaped the maelstrom. A collective sigh of relief filled the bridge, but their respite was short-lived. "Incoming transmission," Evan announced. "It's Marcus!" Marcus's face appeared on the console, his expression grim. "We've got company. Zoltar's forces are right on our tail." Ralph nodded. "Rendezvous at these coordinates. We'll figure out our next move there." As Marcus's ship approached, a new threat loomed before them. A colossal structure filled the viewport, dwarfing their vessels. "What the hell is that?" Lila breathed. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared. Dozens of small, sleek objects detached from the megastructure, racing towards them. Marcus's voice crackled over the comm. "On it, boss. Zaxxon, you ready for a little spacewalk?" The alien smuggler's reply was tinged with nervousness. "I suppose we don't have much choice." Ralph watched as Marcus and Zaxxon jetted out into the void, pulse rifles at the ready. The drones swarmed around them, energy weapons flashing. Marcus moved with inhuman speed, his genetic enhancements allowing him to dodge incoming fire with ease. Zaxxon struggled to keep up, his movements clumsy in comparison. "Watch your six," Marcus called out, blasting a drone that had snuck up behind Zaxxon. The alien spun, narrowly avoiding the debris. "Thanks, A stray shot clipped Zaxxon's tether, sending him tumbling into the void. Ralph's heart leapt into his throat as he watched the alien smuggler spiraling away from the ship. As they made their way back, Ralph couldn't help but marvel at the bond forming between human and alien. Despite their differences, They were in this fight together. With the immediate threat neutralized, Ralph plotted a course deeper into the void rifts. Days passed in a blur of near misses and hasty course corrections. Finally, they emerged into a relatively calm area of space. "We made it," Evan said, his voice filled with awe. "Those are the coordinates for Erebus." But as they approached, Ralph's hope turned to ash. A massive debris field surrounded the planet, the remnants of some ancient calamity. The Whisper pointed to a readout. Energy signatures, progenitor tech, still active after all this time. Before Ralph could respond, a new voice cut through their comms, cold, cruel, and unmistakable. "Well, well," Cracks the Bloodhunter drawled. "Looks like we've got ourselves a reunion." Vorkarian ships materialized from the debris, weapons primed and ready. Ralph's mind raced, searching for a way out. But as he turned to the Whisper for guidance, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The enigmatic alien was holding a weapon, trained directly at Ralph's head. "I'm afraid this is where our partnership ends," the Whisper said, voice devoid of emotion. "The Vorkarians made me an offer I simply couldn't refuse." Ralph's hand inched towards his own weapon. "After everything we've been through?" Chaos erupted as Krax's forces opened fire. Marcus and Zaxxon scrambled to defend the ship, while Ralph, Evan, and Lila fought their way past the Whisper. "We need to find the source of those energy readings," Ralph shouted over the din of battle. "It's our only chance." They pushed deeper into the debris field, dodging enemy fire and searching desperately for any sign of intact progenitor tech. And then they saw it. A massive vessel, half buried in the wreckage. "That's it!" Evan cried. "The energy readings are coming from inside." As they approached the ancient ship, Ralph's mind reeled. This could be it, the key to unlocking the secrets of human evolution, the truth behind the Genesis Codex. But with cracks closing in, and the Whisper's betrayal still stinging, Ralph knew they were far from safe. They had found their prize, but the real battle was just beginning. The ancient progenitor vessel shuddered as Ralph, Evan, and Lila raced through its labyrinthine corridors. Alien technology pulsed with an eerie blue glow, illuminating their path deeper into the heart of the ship. Evan wasted no time, interfacing his portable computer with the nearest data terminal. Lines of alien code streamed across his screen. "I've never seen anything like this. The genetic engineering techniques, they're light years beyond anything we've ever developed." Ralph leaned in, studying the scrolling data. His breath caught as a familiar sequence flashed by. "Wait, go back. That's human DNA." Evan's fingers flew across the keys, isolating the sequence. "You're right, but look at these modifications. The progenitors didn't just guide our evolution. They rewrote our genetic code from the ground up." Lila shook her head in disbelief. "So everything we thought we knew about human potential, it was all engineered?" Before Ralph could respond, a violent tremor rocked the ship. Alarms blared, bathing the room in pulsing red light. "We've got company," Marcus's voice crackled over their comms. "Vorkarian strike force incoming, the Whispers with them." Ralph cursed under his breath. "Marcus, Zaxxon, can you hold them off?" "We'll do our best," Marcus replied, his voice strained. "But this ship's weapons are ancient. We're not exactly working with top-of-the-line tech here." The ship lurched again as Marcus and Zaxxon engaged the pursuing Vorkarian fleet. Through the comms, Ralph heard the alien smuggler yelp in surprise. "How do you humans say it?" Zaxxon shouted. "Hang on to your buttocks." Despite the dire situation, Ralph couldn't help but crack a smile. It vanished quickly as another impact rocked the vessel. "We need to find the Genesis Codex," Ralph urged, turning back to Evan and Lila. "It's got to be here somewhere." They scoured the databanks, racing against time as the battle raged outside. Suddenly, Lila called out, "I found something! A secure partition, heavily encrypted." Evan joined her, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "This is it. The security protocols. They're unlike anything I've ever seen." As they worked to breach the Codex's defenses, Ralph noticed a flashing warning on a nearby screen. His blood ran cold as he deciphered the alien text. "Guys," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we've got a bigger problem." Lila looked up, concern etched across her face. "What is it?" Ralph swallowed hard. "The progenitors didn't just give us our abilities. They built in a failsafe, a genetic doomsday switch." Evan's eyes widened in horror. "You mean—" Ralph nodded grimly. "If activated, it could wipe out every other species in the galaxy. We're not just looking at a weapon. We're looking at genocide on a cosmic scale." The ship rocked violently, nearly throwing them off their feet. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. "Ralph, we've got a problem. The Whisper's down, but Zoltar's breached our outer defenses. They'll be inside any minute." Ralph's mind raced. The Genesis Codex lay within their grasp, the key to unlocking humanity's full potential. But at what cost? As Zoltar's forces drew ever closer, he realized the terrible choice that lay before him. "Evan, Lila," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision, "we need to find that codex, and then we need to destroy it." Lila gasped. "But Ralph, everything we've fought for—" "Isn't worth the price," Ralph finished. "We can't risk that kind of power falling into the wrong hands, not even our own." As if to punctuate his words, the ship's internal sensors blared a warning. Zoltar had breached the inner sanctum. The race was on, with the fate of the stars hanging in the balance. Ralph's heart pounded as he stared at the pulsing data streams before him. The Genesis Codex lay exposed, its secrets laid bare. He turned to Evan and Lila, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's only one way to stop Zoltar and keep this power from Emperor Umbra. We have to activate the failsafe." Evan's eyes widened. "The genetic doomsday switch? Ralph, that could wipe out every non-human species in the galaxy." "I know," Ralph said, his voice heavy. "But if we don't, the Vorkarians will use it to do far worse." Lila stepped forward, her face pale. "How do we even access it?" Ralph tapped a series of commands into the alien interface. "We need to integrate my genetic code with the codex. I'll become the trigger." As they worked feverishly to breach the progenitor security protocols, the ship shuddered under another barrage of Vorkarian fire. Ralph opened a comm channel to Marcus. "Marcus, we've got a plan, but it's not good." He explained the failsafe and its consequences. There was a long pause before Marcus responded. "I know, but it's our only shot at stopping Zoltar." Another pause, then, "Do it. We'll buy you the time you need." Ralph, Evan, and Lila delved deeper into the Codex's systems. Alien symbols flashed across the screens as they navigated through layer after layer of security. "Wait!" Lila cried out, grabbing Ralph's wrist. "That sequence, if we'd activated it, it would have triggered the pandemic immediately." They worked with agonizing precision, acutely aware that one wrong move could spell doom for all life in the galaxy. Sweat beaded on Ralph's forehead as he interfaced the final connections between his own DNA and the Codex. A blinding flash erupted from the console. Ralph gasped as he felt the Codex's power surge through him, rewriting his very genetic structure. Suddenly the ship's internal sensors blared. Zoltar had breached the inner sanctum. "Ralph," Marcus's voice crackled over the comm. "They're coming. We can't hold them back much longer." Ralph locked eyes with Evan and Lila. "Get to the ship. I'll handle this." As his companions fled, Ralph stood alone in the chamber. He heard the thundering footsteps of Zoltar's forces approaching. The Vorkarian commander burst through the door, his alien features twisted in triumph. "The Codex is mine!" He released the genetic pandemic. A wave of invisible energy pulsed outward. Zoltar stumbled, confusion turning to horror as his body began to break down at the cellular level. His troops collapsed around him, writhing in agony. Ralph ran, his stomach churning at the carnage he'd unleashed. He sprinted through corridors littered with the disintegrating bodies of Vorkarian soldiers. He found Marcus slumped against a wall, blood seeping from a wound in his side. Together they staggered towards their ship. As they lifted off, Ralph saw Zaxxon at the controls, but something was wrong. The alien's skin had taken on a sickly pallor, his movements sluggish. They escaped the progenitor vessel, leaving behind the devastation of the pandemic. But as Zaxxon's condition worsened, the full weight of what Ralph had done crashed down upon him. He'd saved humanity from the Vorkarians, but at what cost? The failsafe was now loose in the galaxy, a ticking time bomb that threatened to eradicate all non-human life. Ralph clenched his fists, his voice filled with grim purpose. "Set a course for the nearest human outpost. We need to find a way to stop this before it's too late." Ralph's hands trembled as he piloted the ship towards refuge, his eyes fixed on the navigation console. Behind him, Evan and Lila huddled over Zaxxon's prone form, monitoring his vital signs with growing desperation. "His cellular degradation is accelerating," Lila reported, her voice tight with worry. "We're losing him, Ralph." Ralph gritted his teeth, pushing the engines to their limits. The stars blurred into streaks of light as they hurtled through space, racing against time itself. As they approached refuge, a heavily fortified space station loomed before them, dripping with defense turrets and scanning arrays. Ralph opened a communication channel. "This is Ralph Williams requesting emergency docking. We have a critically ill passenger and—" "Negative," a stern voice cut him off. "Our sensors detect an unknown pathogen on your vessel. You are denied entry." Ralph banged his head on the console. "Damn it, we don't have time for this. Patch me through to Dr. Helena Vance. Tell her it's Ralph." Tense minutes passed as they waited, Zaxxon's labored breathing the only sound in the cockpit. Finally, a familiar face appeared on the monitor. "Ralph, what in God's name have you gotten yourself into this time?" "Helena, I need your help. We've got a progenitor pandemic on our hands, and my friend is dying. You're our only hope." Dr. Vance's eyes widened. She turned, barking orders to someone off-screen before facing Ralph again. "Dock at Bay 7. We'll have a containment team ready." The next hours passed in a blur of decontamination procedures and frantic explanations. Zaxxon was rushed to an isolation ward, while Ralph and the others were subjected to rigorous scans and tests. In the facility's main lab, Ralph watched as Dr. Vance and her team pored over data, streaming across holographic displays. The geneticist's face grew increasingly grim. "This pathogen. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's adapting faster than we can develop countermeasures." Ralph stepped forward, his decision made. "Then use me. Alter my genome, unlock whatever the progenitors built into our DNA. Make me the countermeasure." "Are nothing compared to what will happen if we do nothing," Ralph finished. "I'll do it." The procedure was agony beyond anything Ralph had ever experienced. He screamed as machines rewrote his genetic code, every cell in his body feeling like it was on fire. Through the haze of pain, he heard alarms blaring, voices shouting that he was going into cardiac arrest. And then, suddenly, clarity. Ralph's eyes snapped open, his vision sharper than ever before. He felt power coursing through him, his mind racing with newfound understanding of the pandemic's structure. "I need a synthetic sequencer," he said, sitting up despite the protests of the medical staff. "Now." Working within human speed and precision, Ralph synthesized a counteragent, his augmented brain processing genetic information faster than any computer. Within hours, they had a treatment. Zaxxon's condition stabilized, the pandemic's spread halted, but as Ralph studied the pathogen's code more closely, he uncovered a terrifying truth. "This wasn't just a failsafe," he breathed, staring at the complex genetic sequences. "It's a dominance protocol. If activated, it could rewrite the genome of every non-human species, making them subservient to us." The implications were staggering. Humanity could rule the galaxy, every alien race genetically programmed to obey them, but the cost... Before they could fully process this revelation, alarms blared throughout the facility. Security feeds showed a Vorkarian assault ship breaching the station's outer defenses. "Impossible," Evan gasped. "They were wiped out." But as the feed zoomed in on the ship's bridge, They saw a familiar, hate-filled face. Commander Zoltar, somehow alive and more terrifying than ever. Ralph's enhanced mind raced, calculating odds and potential outcomes. He knew that the coming confrontation would determine not just their fate, but that of every sentient being in the galaxy. The klaxons blared throughout refuge, jolting Ralph from his uneasy sleep. He sprang from his bunk, heart pounding as he raced to the command center. The holographic displays flickered to life, revealing a chilling sight. Zoltar's assault ship, dripping with weapons, bearing down on the station. "How the hell did he survive?" Marcus growled, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to rapidly analyze the incoming threat data. Ralph's genetically augmented mind raced through possibilities. "It doesn't matter. We need to protect the labs at all costs." Zaxxon, his alien features set in grim concentration, nodded. "I'll coordinate our defense batteries. We can't let them breach the outer hull." As Ralph sprinted towards the genetic research labs, the station shuddered under the first volley of Vorkarian fire. Emergency force fields snapped into place, containment protocols activating automatically. A deafening explosion rocked the corridor. Ralph stumbled, catching Dr. Vance before she fell. Through the smoke and debris, he saw the twisted metal of a breached airlock. Vorkarian soldiers poured through the gap, their alien weapons spitting energy bolts. "Get to the secure vault," Ralph shouted, pushing Dr. Vance behind him. He felt the surge of power within him, his enhanced muscles coiling with newfound strength. The first Vorkarian to reach him raised its weapon, but Ralph moved with blinding speed. He struck, his augmented fist connecting with a sickening crunch. The alien flew backward, crashing into its comrades. Ralph fought like a man possessed, his body moving with inhuman grace and power. But for every Vorkarian he struck down, two more took its place. They were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. A familiar, hate-filled voice cut through the chaos. "Williams!" Ralph turned to see Zoltar himself striding through the breach, his eyes gleaming with mad triumph. Before Ralph could react, the Vorkarian commander raised a strange, pulsing device. Pain exploded through Ralph's skull. He fell to his knees, his enhanced senses overloaded by whatever Zoltar was wielding. "Did you think you were the only one who could harness progenitor technology?" Zoltar sneered. He gestured to his troops, who dragged forward a struggling Dr. Vance. Ralph fought against the agony, trying to focus. "Let her go, Zoltar. This is between you and me." The Vorkarian's lipless mouth twisted in a grotesque approximation of a smile. "Oh, but it's so much more than that. You will give me the activation codes for the transformation sequence, or the good doctor dies." Ralph's mind raced, searching for a way out. He couldn't let Zoltar unleash the pandemic's full power, but he couldn't sacrifice Dr. Vance either. Then an idea struck him. "All right," Ralph said, his voice hoarse. "I'll give you the codes." He slowly stood, fighting against the pain still throbbing in his head. Ralph moved to a nearby console, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. As he worked, he prayed his ruse would succeed. "There," Ralph said, transmitting the sequence to Zoltar's device. "That will activate the transformation protocol." Zoltar's eyes widened with anticipation. He released Dr. Vance, shoving her roughly aside as he input the code into his own systems. Suddenly, Zoltar howled in rage. "What have you done?" Ralph allowed himself a grim smile. "I've overwritten the mutagenic properties of the pathogen. It's useless now." Zoltar's face contorted with fury. He raised his weapon, aiming it at Dr. Vance's head. "Then you've killed her." Time seemed to slow. Ralph saw Zoltar's finger tightening on the trigger. He saw Dr. Vance's eyes widen in terror, and then he saw Evan, dear, brave Evan, hurling himself between them. The energy bolt meant for Dr. Vance struck Evan square in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, smoke rising from the charred hole in his body. "Oh!" Ralph screamed, rushing to his friend's side. Evan's eyes fluttered open, meeting Ralph's gaze one last time. With trembling fingers, Evan tapped out a final sequence on his wrist computer. Ralph felt a pulse of energy ripple through the station, through his very cells. The pandemic was truly neutralized now, its transformative power forever lost. Ralph's fingers trembled as he straightened his dress uniform. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, heavier than any medal pinned to his chest. He gazed out the window of the shuttle as it descended towards Earth, the blue-green orb growing larger with each passing moment. "You okay?" Marcus asked, his voice low. Ralph nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud and the hatch hissed open. A sea of faces greeted them, a roar of applause rising up as Ralph and his team stepped onto the tarmac. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Ralph kept his eyes forward, focusing on the podium where Earth's most powerful leaders awaited them. He felt Lila's hand on his arm, steadying him. "Heroes of humanity," the Secretary General's voice boomed across the crowd. "We gather here today to honor those who have saved us from annihilation." Ralph stepped up to the microphone, his enhanced senses picking up every rustle of clothing, every intake of breath. He looked out at the sea of expectant faces and knew what he had to do. "I stand before you not as a hero," Ralph began, his voice calm despite the turmoil within, "but as a man who has seen the precipice of our potential destruction. The progenitor technology, the Genesis Codex, these are not tools of progress but weapons that could enslave entire species. Today I announce my intention to destroy all remnants of this technology." Gasps rippled through the audience. Ralph saw fury flash across the faces of several military leaders. "You can't be serious." General Hawthorne, a grizzled veteran, stood up. "That technology could ensure human dominance for millennia." Ralph's enhanced eyes locked onto the general's. "And that is precisely why it must be destroyed. No single species should wield such power over others." Shouts erupted from the crowd. Ralph felt Marcus and Zaxxon move closer, flanking him protectively. In the chaos that followed, Ralph gathered his allies. Dr. Elena Chen, a brilliant xenobiologist, Dr. Sanjay Patel, an expert in progenitor tech, and of course, his core team, Marcus, Lila, and Zaxxon. They slipped away under cover of night, boarding a nondescript freighter. Ralph input the coordinates Zaxxon had obtained, his fingers flying over the nav computer. "You sure about this?" Zaxxon asked, his alien features unreadable. The ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace, hurtling towards the Phantom Nebula. Hours later they emerged into a glittering sea of stars and gases, and there, drifting silently, was the ancient progenitor vessel. As they prepared to board, alarms blared. A sleek military cruiser dropped out of hyperspace behind them. "Attention, unauthorized vessel," a cold female voice crackled over the comms. "This is Colonel Irina Kozlov. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Ralph's team scrambled for their weapons. The hull rang with the impact of mag grapples as Kozlov's forces latched onto their ship. The airlock blew inward in a shower of sparks. Kozlov's soldiers poured through, weapons blazing. Ralph ducked behind a bulkhead, returning fire with his enhanced reflexes. "Get to the progenitor ship," he shouted to the others. In the chaotic firefight that followed, Ralph saw Zaxxon take a hit meant for Lila. The alien smuggler crumpled to the deck, green blood pooling beneath him. "Go," Marcus yelled, dragging Ralph towards the airlock connecting them to the progenitor vessel. "I'll cover you." Ralph hesitated, torn between his mission and his fallen friend, but he knew what had to be done. With a final glance at Zaxxon's still form, he sprinted for the ancient ship's data core. Inside the vast chamber, Ralph's fingers flew over alien controls, initiating the purge sequence. Lines of code flashed across holographic displays as centuries of knowledge began to vanish. A slow clap echoed through the room. Ralph spun to see Colonel Kozlov stepping out of the shadows, flanked by her soldiers. And there, standing beside her with a triumphant smirk, was Lila. "I'm disappointed, Ralph," Kozlov said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I expected more from the man who unlocked humanity's true potential." Ralph's eyes darted between Kozlov and Lila, his knees going weak from the betrayal. "Lila, why?" Lila's smirk faltered for a moment. "Because she showed me the truth, Ralph. We have the power to rule the stars. Why shouldn't we use it? You know why, Ralph said, his voice heavy with sorrow. It would doom countless species to subjugation. Kozlov stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with fanatical intensity. It is our destiny, our birthright. Now stop this purge and give us the Codex data, or we'll take it from your corpse. Ralph's enhanced mind raced, calculating possibilities. He knew he couldn't let the Codex fall into Kozlov's hands. With lightning speed, he spun back to the console, fingers flying as he completed the purge sequence. "No!" Kozlov screamed. The sound of gunfire filled the chamber. Ralph felt the impacts, his body jerking as bullets tore through him. He slumped against the console, his lifeblood seeping onto the alien metal. Through dimming vision, he saw Marcus burst into the room, gun blazing. Kozlov's forces fell before his enhanced reflexes. "Ralph!" Marcus cradled his friend's head. "Hold on, we'll get you out of here." As darkness closed in, Ralph saw Marcus turn, raising his weapon towards Kozlov and her remaining forces. The last thing he heard was the sound of gunfire, carrying with it the hope that his sacrifice would not be in vain. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.